As we continue, of course, we decided to flip things on you today. Instead of bringing you our usual Africa slot earlier, we decided to make our issue about African youth, because after all, yesterday was Africa Day, and we joined by some dynamic young people to have a conversation with us this morning. Now, unemployment, education, hunger, and economic growth, to name but a few, are some of the issues facing young people on the African continent. Now, young leaders across the continent came together under one roof under the theme Youth Collaboration Towards a Shared Prosperous Africa. Now, this morning we're discussing some of the issues that young people face on the continent and how can they overcome them. To talk more about that, we're now joined in studio by two young people, Palesa Motsumi and Mwende Katwiwa, who are part of the Breaking Down Borders Youth Summit. Now, remember, you can be part of our conversation by giving us a call on 011-447-1742. We're also taking your comments on Facebook as well as our Twitter pages this morning. See, I didn't have it planned this way, that we have ladies, but hey, maybe that's how things are going to be going forward. Good morning to you, ladies.
Good morning.
Okay, great stuff. Okay, so let's just start with getting a sense of who you guys are and what you do. Palesa, you're from Bloemfontein, but you're based in Cape Town. Just give us a brief background on of what you do and how you got involved with the summit.
I got involved, first of all, through a friend of mine. We went to university together, Nangam Sokoza. She runs Inkubelo Foundation. She was part of the organizing committee for Breaking Down Borders Africa Youth Summit. And she invited me because she felt that I did work that was important for young people. And I'd been involved in the creative arts for quite some time. And it was quite an interesting experience. I run an organization called Samatasa Library, which is a social events, social enterprise, which basically deals with talks. We organize panel discussions, but we're also venturing into exhibition making. And it's basically an interesting platform for young black women to get involved in the creative arts. And as we know, young people have to have a platform to express themselves in terms of the creative arts, and Breaking Down Borders was that platform where we could discuss, collaborate, and talk more about the creative arts.
Okay, so we're also joined by Mwende Katwiwa. You're from Kenya,
yes.
And you also you go between Kenya and New Orleans in the US.
Yes.
Okay, so what do you do exactly? How you get involved?
I'm an artist, I'm a writer, and so I met Paul actually in New Orleans when he came down for the Mandela Washington Fellows Program, and then we met again in Nairobi when he came down to do part of his dance tour in, I believe it was 10 different African countries. Yes, and so when we were in Nairobi, we were speaking a lot about what decolonization looked like. I took him around to like Karura Forest and other important sites in Kenya in that liberation struggle. And we also were talking about the role of artists and storytellers, and specifically African storytelling as a way to imagine ourselves into the future. And so he said, maybe you should come join us for this conference. And I said, let's go.
Okay, what I like is that you're all talking about how you met someone and they invited you, and they're all young people doing something in different spheres, but within a similar kind of space. Yes. So the role of this conference, and from your own take out, it started on the 15th. It went on until the 20th. This Breaking Down Borders, what was that all about?
I think for us, we're talking not just about the physical borders that are on our land, but also about the mental, emotional, psychological barriers that have been put up by the process of colonization. So when we talk about breaking down borders, we're not just looking at the land and how we've physically been separated by lines that are drawn into a map, but don't actually exist in our world, but how have we started to believe so much in those borders that they've actually become real in separating us.
Okay. So in the conference, how did you guys sort of like deal with trying to remove those borders, whether they're psychological or in a physical sense?
I think we looked at many issues around advocacy, how young people can get involved in civic organizations, and also mobilizing our young people in terms of how they can get involved in political spaces. I think that's vital for young people in South Africa and Africa as a whole. We talked about how we can get involved within creating a platform that would open up conversations around what is it that we need as young people. We delved into the National Development Plan, which was firstly part of the first day of the conference. So we discussed a lot of issues around policy, and that was a vital
point for us as young people, because we could actually see where we can align ourselves with what is happening in the political space.
Okay, so obviously this was the first time that this conference was happening. In terms of like the participation of young people from different parts of the continent, you're from East Africa, and at the same time you're exposed to being in the US. And she spoke about policy, like a national development plan, which specifically speaks to South Africa. And then there's like Agenda 2063, which speaks to, you know, across the continent. What would you say young people, what was their contribution to that conversation, would you say was?
I think one of the overarching contributions that kept coming day after day was this idea that regardless of what these goals are set, we can't really reach them until we decolonize our education system and really start to think about what would an Africa for Africans, created by Africans, even funded by Africans, what would it actually look like, and what would it look like for us to pursue our own goals, not beholden to anybody else in the world, except our own interests as people across the continent.
Okay, so these policies are set, by leaders in different spaces, and as young people, and then I guess all of us as citizens, we have to find our ways of plugging in. Do you think there is enough consultation, and maybe some of the things that we concern about are taken into consideration? And you mentioned how, okay, they're there, but we need to start with the education. But there's everyday issues that you have to worry about.
Right.
You know, while you're trying to change the world, you're starving.
Yes. But I think that's what was so beautiful about the gathering, is it didn't just bring guys who are, top level positions in these internationally recognized NGOs. There were some guys like that, but then there was also guys who are doing this everyday work, again, of making sure that people are being fed, that people are going to school, that people are having access to things that they don't usually have on an everyday basis, as we're also planning 20, 50, 200 years into the future to make sure that we're not struggling this day-to-day struggle that we're doing now that's keeping us from reaching our full potential.
And I think
go ahead.
I think we also took a conscious decision to really go deeper into issues around radical social consciousness and what that means in terms of young people really knowing their history and knowing where they come from, but also taking a solution-driven approach to each and every problem that we had, that we were discussing at the time. So issues around education came up very strongly. Fees must fall was one of the points that we discussed in terms of how do we actually make sure that Fees Must Fall becomes a reality as well, as well as we discussed things like advocacy around the creative arts, and that was a tool for change for us as well. Okay,
here's a scary fact, is that 60% of unemployed people continentally are young people, and young women, are severely hit the hardest. And, so the question is, are African youth a ticking time bomb or an opportunity?
I think it becomes up to us to determine, right?
Yeah.
If we're intentional with the ways we're moving forward, then I think we can take advantage of those 60% of folks who we say are unemployed, right? But we also need to interrogate and look at our language and structures, right?
Yeah.
What does unemployment actually mean in a capitalist system? Because there are so many Africans who I know, for instance, in Kenya, who are unemployed. And we call it informal as if it's not sustaining families and communities. So I think we also need to interrogate the language and the way that we're looking at our own cultures and systems and saying, are we measuring up to what we consider progress, or are we measuring up to whether it's capitalist or Western or whatever other standards of progress and moving forward? And then we'll be able to say, is it an opportunity or is it a time bomb?
Okay, maybe that's the question that we need to ask you at home, and you can contribute to our conversation. The role that young people can play in taking the continent forward. Are they an opportunity? Are they a ticking time bomb? And what is your understanding? And how do you think, young people on the continent can break down the borders for the sake of a brighter, future of this continent of ours? So give us a call and be part of that conversation, of course, right here on the show. Okay, so Palesa, one of the challenges of having been segregated from the rest of the continent as South Africans, that we struggle to embrace, interact. I'm not even thinking about collaborating yet, the rest of the continent. And how did you guys deal with that, within the summit? Was that addressed, issues of identity,
I think we had phenomenal speakers. First of all, we had speakers that delved into our consciousness. I think as young Africans, we're right in the middle of discovering ourselves, and that was a very important part for us to discover ourselves and rediscover ourselves within the summit. As a personal experience, I think I dealt with the separation quite differently in terms of looking at everybody, what everybody contributed on the table and what everybody brought to the table. I was sharing a panel with phenomenal people from Guinea-Bissau who brought so many things forward about what's happening within the creative arts there. I was sharing a panel with people from Uganda. So it was a very enlightening experience in terms of how we looked at our various areas of expertise, or perhaps maybe not even expertise, but what we brought to the table in terms of the summit. It was one of those experiences where if anybody was to say, I want to be there next year, I would advise them to be there, because it just really broke down so many issues down in terms of, as Mwende alluded. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to take an ad break, and then we'll also take the news. We'll come back and with some of your comments on our Facebook page and continue to chat. Maybe I can also twist those ladies to do a few lines from the poems, because I heard that they can perform something for me. So do stay with us. We're coming back with more Sunrise Live right here in East.
Need a natural multivitamin and mineral immune booster that lifts your energy and balances your pH levels? Sure you do. Lerumo, with 15 times the potassium in bananas, 17 times the calcium in milk, 10 times the vitamin A in